The trial. Jesus went through 6 trials before his execution, 3 stages in a religious court and 3 stages before a Roman court. Jesus was led to Annas, then Caiaphas, and after being questioned throughout the night, he was bound up and led away to Pilate. The Jewish high priest and the Jewish high court, the Sanhedrin, effectively asked Jesus 2 questions during his trial. 1, are you the Messiah? And 2, are you the Son of God? To both of these, Jesus answered, I am. This was enough to condemn Jesus for blaspheming God and claiming to be God. In these trials, the authorities disregarded many of their own Jewish beliefs and laws. Trials were not to be held during feast times. This one was held during the Passover. Every member of the court was to vote individually to convict or acquit. In the trials Jesus went through, he was convicted by acclamation. A night had to pass before a death sentence could be carried out. In the trials of Jesus, only a few hours passed before he was placed on the cross. The Jews had no authority to execute anyone. Trials were not to be held at night. Jesus' trial was held before dawn. The accused person was to be given representation. Jesus had none. The accused person was not to be asked self-incriminating questions. Jesus was asked if he was the Christ. This court found him guilty of blasphemy and claiming to be the Son of God, so he was sent to the Roman court. Luke 23, 1 through 25. The entire council took Jesus to Pilate, the Roman governor. They began to state their case. This man has been leading our people astray by telling them not to pay their taxes to the Roman government and by claiming he is the Messiah, a king. So Pilate asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus replied, you have said it. Pilate turned to the leading priests and to the crowd and said, I find nothing wrong with this man. Then they became insistent. But he is causing riots by his teaching wherever he goes, all over Judea, from Galilee to Jerusalem. Oh, he is a Galilean? Pilate asked. When they said that he was, Pilate sent him to Herod Antipas, because Galilee was under Herod's jurisdiction, and Herod happened to be in Jerusalem at the time. Herod was delighted at the opportunity to see Jesus, because he had heard about him and had been hoping for a long time to see him perform a miracle. He asked Jesus question after question, but Jesus refused to answer. Meanwhile, the leading priests and the teachers of religious law stood there shouting their accusations. Then Herod and his soldiers began mocking Jesus. Finally, they put a royal robe on him and sent him back to Pilate. Then Pilate called together the leading priests and other religious leaders along with the people, and he announced his verdict. You brought this man to me, accusing him of leading a revolt. I have examined him thoroughly on this point in your presence and find him innocent. Herod came to the same conclusion and sent him back to us. Nothing this man has done calls for the death penalty, so I will have him flogged, and then I will release him. Then a mighty roar rose from the crowd, and with one voice they shouted, Kill him and release Barabbas to us. Pilate argued with them because he wanted to release Jesus, but they kept shouting, Crucify him, crucify him. For the 3rd time he demanded, Why? What crime has he committed? I have found no reason to sentence him to death. So I will have him flogged, and then I will release him. But the mob shouted louder and louder, demanding that Jesus be crucified, and their voices prevailed. So Pilate sentenced Jesus to die, as they commanded. As they had requested, he released Barabbas, the man in prison for insurrection and murder. But he turned Jesus over to them to do as they wished. The trials before the Roman authorities started with Pilate after Jesus was beaten. The charges brought against him were very different from the charges in his religious trial. He was charged with inciting people to riot, forbidding the people to pay their taxes and claiming to be king. Pilate found no reason to kill Jesus, so he sent him to Herod. Herod had Jesus ridiculed, but wanting to avoid the political liability, sent Jesus back to Pilate. This was the last trial, as Pilate tried to appease the animosity of the Jews by having Jesus scourged. The Roman scourge is a terrible whipping of 39 lashes. In a final effort to have Jesus released, Pilate offered the prisoner Barabbas to be crucified and Jesus released, but to no avail. The crowds called for Barabbas to be released and Jesus to be crucified. Pilate granted their demand and surrendered Jesus to their will. The trials of Jesus represent the ultimate mockery of justice. Jesus, the most innocent man in the history of the world, was found guilty of crimes and sentenced to death by crucifixion. After reading this, I want to cry out, this isn't fair. But fair wasn't a part of Jesus' plan. His plan was for mercy. Mercy for you and for me. If we were to look at Jesus' death merely as a result of a betrayer's deceit and the Sanhedrin's envy and Pilate's spinelessness and the soldier's nail and spear, it might seem very involuntary. But Jesus was not accidentally entangled in a web of injustice. The saving benefits of his death for sinners were not an afterthought. God planned it all out of infinite love to sinners like us. Jesus, who was the very embodiment of his Father's love, saw that the time had come and set his face to fulfill his mission, to die in Jerusalem for our sake. No one takes my life from me, Jesus said. I lay it down of my own accord. John 10:18. Jesus' response to being treated unfairly and mistreated was love. He didn't look at his accuser and think, oh, you just wait until you get yours. But his response was, Father, forgive them. They don't even know what they are doing. Their emotions, they're running so high that reason isn't even a factor. And he still looked on them with grace and love. What is our response to being treated unfairly or mistreated? Is it retribution? Or is it, Father, forgive them and help me to forgive them as well? Take some time to thank God for his willingness to endure an unfair trial and death. The beauty of him and his love, as it is reflected in the mercy he gives to us. Lord, help me forgive those who have hurt me or have treated me unfairly. Take a rose petal to remind you of the beauty of Christ's love and that it can be found even among thorny circumstances.